Sarah Martinez clutched her flight bag tighter as she walked across the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. The morning sun cast long shadows across the runway, and the familiar smell of jet fuel filled her nostrils. At 28, she had worked harder than most of her male counterparts to earn her place among the elite fighter pilots, but today felt different. Today, whispers followed her wherever she went. The trouble had started 3 days earlier during the weekly pilot briefing. Colonel Harrison had announced the upcoming Red Flag exercise, a massive international training operation that would bring together the best pilots from around the world. Sarah had been selected to participate, flying the F-16 Fighting Falcon with the call sign Viper-7. It should have been the proudest moment of her career, but instead, it became the source of endless mockery. "Look at Princess Pilot with her shiny new call sign," Lieutenant Jake Morrison had whispered loud enough for half the briefing room to hear. The comment sparked a ripple of barely suppressed laughter among some of the other pilots. Sarah kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, her jaw clenched. But inside, her heart was racing. She had heard the comments before. The suggestions that she only got her position because of gender quotas, that she was more liability than asset in the cockpit. Captain Rick Torres, sitting 2 rows behind her, leaned forward to his buddy. "Viper-7? More like Barbie-7. Wonder how she'll handle real combat scenarios when she can barely handle the jokes." The comment drew more snickers, and Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. She had graduated second in her flight school class, had logged over 800 hours of flight time, and had consistently outperformed many of her peers in simulations. Yet, none of that seemed to matter. After the briefing, Sarah walked quickly toward the hangar, hoping to avoid further confrontation, but Morrison caught up with her in the corridor, flanked by 2 other pilots she recognized but didn't know well. "Hey, Martinez," he called out, his tone dripping with false friendliness. "You sure you're ready for this? Red Flag isn't some weekend joyride. Real pilots might get hurt if you freeze up out there." Sarah stopped and turned to face him, her brown eyes steady and calm despite the storm brewing inside her. "I've been flying combat missions for 3 years, Morrison. My record speaks for itself." Her voice was quiet but firm, the tone she had learned to use when dealing with difficult situations. It was the voice that said she wouldn't be intimidated, even when everything inside her wanted to scream. Morrison smirked. "Records can be manipulated, Princess. We all know how the system works these days. Diversity looks good on paper." His companions laughed, and Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had worked twice as hard as anyone else to prove she belonged here, had sacrificed personal relationships and social life to excel in a male-dominated field. And still, they reduced her to a quota. "If you'll excuse me, I have pre-flight checks to complete," Sarah said, turning away from the group. As she walked toward her aircraft, she heard Morrison's voice behind her. "Try not to break anything important. Viper-7. Some of us actually need these planes to work." The hangar was quieter, filled with the steady hum of maintenance crews working on various aircraft. Sarah's F-16, tail number 91-0418, sat gleaming under the bright fluorescent lights. She ran her hands along the smooth metal of the fuselage, drawing comfort from the familiar feel of the machine she had come to know better than most people. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the head of maintenance, approached with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Good morning, Lieutenant Martinez. She's ready for you," he said, patting the side of the aircraft affectionately. Rodriguez had been in the Air Force for 22 years and had seen countless pilots come and go. He judged them not by their gender or background, but by how they treated their aircraft and their crew. Sarah had earned his respect early on by always taking time to understand the mechanical aspects of her plane and by treating the maintenance crew with genuine appreciation. "Thank you, Chief. Any issues I should know about?" Sarah asked, pulling on her flight gloves. She always asked the same question, and Rodriguez always appreciated that she actually listened to the answer. Too many pilots treated the maintenance crew like furniture, assuming their aircraft would magically be perfect without ever acknowledging the skilled work that made it possible. "Just replaced the radio antenna yesterday. Might want to run a communications check before you taxi out," Rodriguez replied. "And Lieutenant, don't let those clowns get under your skin. I've seen you fly, and you're one of the best we have. The plane knows it, even if some people don't. Sarah felt a rush of gratitude toward the older man. In a world where she often felt isolated and scrutinized, Rodriguez's simple acknowledgement of her skills meant more than he could know. I appreciate that, Chief, really. As she began her pre-flight inspection, Sarah's mind wandered to her father, Colonel Miguel Martinez, who had served in the Air Force for 30 years before retiring. He had always encouraged her aviation dreams, even when others suggested she pursue more appropriate career paths. Mija, he had told her during her first week of flight school, they're going to test you harder than anyone else. Not because they hate you, but because they're scared. Scared that you'll prove women can do this job just as well as men. Don't let their fear become your doubt. The memory strengthened her resolve as she checked the control surfaces, tested the landing gear, and verified the weapon systems. Every movement was precise and methodical, the result of years of training and experience. She had performed this routine hundreds of times, but today it felt more significant somehow. Today, she wasn't just preparing for another training flight. She was preparing to prove that Viper-7 belonged in the sky. Inside the cockpit, Sarah went through her startup procedures with practiced efficiency. The familiar hum of the engines coming online was like a lullaby, calming her nerves and focusing her mind. She adjusted her helmet, checked her oxygen supply, and ran through the communication systems. When she keyed the radio for her first check-in, her voice was steady and professional. Ground control, this is Viper-7 requesting taxi clearance for red flag mission Alpha 1. The response came back immediately. Viper-7. Ground control. Taxi to runway 21. Left. Contact tower. On 118.7. As Sarah began to taxi toward the runway, she could see other aircraft preparing for the same mission. F-15 Eagles, F-18 Super Hornets, and even a few international participants, including RAF, Typhoons, and German Tornadoes. The sight should have been inspiring, a testament to international cooperation and military excellence. Instead, Sarah felt the weight of being the only woman among nearly 40 pilots participating in this phase of the exercise. The radio crackled with routine communications as pilots checked in with various controllers. Sarah listened carefully, noting the call signs and positions of other aircraft. As she approached the runway, she saw Morrison's F-16 inches, the lineup ahead of her. Even from a distance, she could see him gesturing animatedly to another pilot, probably sharing another joke at her expense. Tower, Viper-7 holding short of runway 21, left, ready for takeoff. Sarah reported when she reached her position. The tower controller's response was crisp and professional, treating her no differently than any other pilot. In the air traffic control world, competence mattered more than gender, and Sarah had always found comfort in that environment. Viper-7, wind 240 at 15, runway 21 left, cleared for takeoff. Sarah pushed the throttles forward, feeling the familiar surge of power as the F-16's engine spooled up to full military thrust. The acceleration pressed her back into her seat as the aircraft rolled down the runway, faster and faster until the moment when Earth fell away and she was truly in her element. The landing gear retracted with mechanical precision, and Sarah banked left to join the formation. From the air, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a landscape of browns and tans broken by distant mountain ranges. Sarah had flown over this terrain countless times during training exercises, but it never lost its stark beauty. More importantly, up here, surrounded by the technology and skill that defined modern aviation, the petty comments and discriminatory attitudes seemed small and insignificant. Red flag control, Viper-7 airborne, checking in as directed, she reported, her voice calm and confident. Whatever challenges lay ahead in the coming exercise, Sarah Martinez was ready to meet them head-on. She had not come this far to be intimidated by narrow-minded colleagues or institutional bias. She was Viper-7, and she belonged in this sky just as much as anyone else. The radio crackled with acknowledgments from red flag control, and Sarah settled into formation with the other aircraft. Today would be the first of many tests, but she was prepared for whatever came next. The snickers and whispers would have to wait. Up here, only performance mattered. The first week of red flag exercises had been a series of escalating challenges, and Sarah Martinez had met each one with quiet determination. Every morning brought new scenarios designed to test the limits of pilot skill and aircraft capability. The international participants had quickly established informal hierarchies based on performance rather than nationality, and Sarah found herself gradually earning respect from pilots who had initially viewed her with skepticism. Flight Lieutenant James Crawford from the Royal Air Force had been one of the first to acknowledge her abilities openly. After a particularly complex air-to-air combat simulation, where Sarah had successfully defended against multiple attackers while maintaining formation integrity, he approached her during the mission debrief. "Brilliant flying out there, Viper-7," he said with genuine admiration. "That defensive split you executed saved the entire formation. Textbook perfect." That was. The comment had been loud enough for several other pilots to hear, including Morrison, who scowled but said nothing. Sarah nodded her thanks to Crawford while maintaining her professional composure. But inside, she felt a small surge of vindication. One positive comment didn't erase weeks of skepticism, but it was progress. Colonel Harrison had been watching the dynamics carefully during the debriefs. A veteran of 25 years with combat experience in 3 different conflicts, he understood the delicate balance required to maintain unit cohesion while ensuring that all pilots performed at their peak. He had also noticed the undercurrent of tension surrounding Sarah's participation, and it concerned him. Military effectiveness depended on trust and mutual respect among team members, and he could see that some pilots were allowing personal prejudices to interfere with professional judgment. During the second week, the exercises intensified significantly. The scenarios became more complex, involving multiple threat types, electronic warfare components, and time-critical objectives. Sarah found herself assigned to increasingly challenging roles, including mission commander for a 4-ship formation tasked with penetrating heavily defended airspace to strike a high-value target. The briefing room fell unusually quiet when Colonel Harrison announced Sarah's role as mission commander. Morrison exchanged glances with Captain Torres, and she could practically feel the skepticism radiating from certain corners of the room. Being selected as mission commander was a significant responsibility, one that typically went to the most experienced and trusted pilots. For a woman to receive such an assignment during an international exercise was virtually unprecedented. "Lieutenant Martinez will be leading Falcon Flight on Mission Charlie 7, Colonel Harrison announced, his voice carrying the authority that came from decades of command experience. The target package includes a simulated command bunker, defended by surface-to-air missiles and combat air patrol. Weather forecast shows possible thunderstorm activity in the target area, and electronic jamming will be active throughout the mission window." Sarah stood and walked to the front of the briefing room to address her flight. Her 3 wingmen included Crawford from the RAF, Captain Angela Rossi from the Italian Air Force, and Lieutenant Marcus Kim, one of the younger American pilots who had maintained a professional attitude throughout the exercises. As she began outlining the mission profile, Sarah was acutely aware that every word would be scrutinized and analyzed by her peers. "Gentleman and lady," she began, acknowledging Rossi with a slight nod. "Our primary objective is to deliver ordnance on target while maintaining formation integrity and avoiding simulated casualties. Intelligence reports suggest the enemy will employ layered defenses, including both radar-guided and infrared-guided surface-to-air missiles." Sarah's briefing was thorough and professional, covering contingency plans, communication protocols, and emergency procedures. She had spent 3 hours the previous evening studying intelligence reports and weather patterns, determined to leave nothing to chance. When she finished, Crawford raised his hand with a question about electronic countermeasures, and their subsequent discussion demonstrated a level of tactical knowledge that impressed even some of her harshest critics. The mission itself proved to be one of the most challenging scenarios of the entire red flag exercise. As Falcon Flight approached the target area, they encountered unexpected weather conditions that forced them to deviate from their planned route. Sarah made rapid adjustments to the flight path, coordinating with her wingmen through a combination of radio calls and hand signals when electronic jamming interfered with communications. "Falcon 2, Falcon 1, weather deviation required. Follow my lead to alternate ingress route," Sarah transmitted, banking her F-16 toward a gap in the storm clouds. The maneuver required precise timing and coordination, as the four aircraft had to maintain formation while navigating through turbulence and reduced visibility. Captain Rossi, flying as Falcon 2, responded immediately. Falcon 1, Falcon 2, Roger, your lead. Maintaining formation. The Italian pilot had initially been reserved about flying under Sarah's command, but her professionalism during the mission planning phase had earned Rossi's respect. Now, faced with challenging conditions, she followed Sarah's lead without hesitation. The surface-to-air missile sights became active as soon as Falcon flight entered the target area. Sarah's radar warning receiver lit up with multiple threat indicators, and she began executing a series of defensive maneuvers designed to defeat the simulated missiles while keeping the formation on course to the target. All Falcons, SAM threat bearing 090, execute Plan Bravo defensive pattern. The four F-16 seconds spread into a defensive formation, each pilot executing specific maneuvers designed to confuse enemy radar systems and draw missiles away from the formation. Sarah coordinated the entire sequence while simultaneously preparing for the attack run, a complex task that required split-second decision-making and absolute trust in her wingmen. Target in sight. All Falcons prepare for attack run, Sarah called out as the simulated command bunker appeared on her targeting display. The approach required threading a path between two mountain peaks while avoiding overlapping missile engagement zones. A challenge that tested every pilot's skill and nerves. The attack itself was executed flawlessly. Each aircraft delivered its simulated ordnance precisely on target before executing a coordinated egress that took them out of the threat area without sustaining any simulated casualties. As they climbed back to cruising altitude, Sarah felt a profound sense of satisfaction, not because she had proven herself to her critics, but because she had successfully led a complex mission that achieved all objectives while bringing every pilot home safely. Outstanding work, Falcon flight, came the voice of Red Flag Control over the radio. Mission objectives achieved. All aircraft accounted for. Textbook execution. The praise was understated in typical military fashion. But Sarah knew that such positive feedback during Red Flag exercises was not given lightly. Back at Nellis, the mission debrief was unlike any Sarah had experienced during her career. Colonel Harrison reviewed the mission video footage, highlighting several instances where Sarah's decision-making had directly contributed to the mission's success. The weather deviation had been perfectly executed. The defensive maneuvers had successfully defeated the simulated threats, and the attack coordination had been precise and efficient. The mission commander demonstrated exceptional situational awareness and tactical flexibility, Colonel Harrison noted, his words carrying particular weight given his extensive combat experience. The decision to alter the ingress route was made at exactly the right moment, and the defensive coordination prevented what could have been multiple simulated casualties. Flight Lieutenant Crawford stood up during the debrief, an unusual action that drew attention from everyone in the room. "Sir, I'd like to add that Lieutenant Martinez's briefing was the most thorough I've experienced during Red Flag. The level of preparation and attention to detail directly contributed to our ability to adapt when conditions changed." Captain Rossi nodded in agreement. The formation leadership was exemplary, clear communications, decisive action, and perfect timing throughout the mission. Her endorsement carried particular significance, as the Italian Air Force had a reputation for exceptionally high standards and rigorous training. Even Lieutenant Kim, who had remained largely neutral throughout the exercises, spoke up. The defensive maneuvers were executed exactly as briefed, and the modifications were seamlessly integrated into the mission flow. Professional leadership throughout. Morrison and Torres remained silent during the debrief, but Sarah noticed that their earlier smirks had been replaced by thoughtful expressions. The evidence of her competence was overwhelming, and even the most skeptical observers were finding it difficult to maintain their prejudices in the face of such clear demonstration of skill and leadership. After the official debrief ended, Sarah was approached by Colonel Harrison. "Walk with me, Lieutenant," he said, leading her away from the group toward the hangar area. Once they were out of earshot of the other pilots, he stopped and turned to face her. "I've been flying for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of pilots come and go," he began, his tone serious but not unkind. "What you did up there today was exceptional, flying by any standard. But more than that, You handled a leadership role under pressure with grace and competence that many senior officers would envy. Sarah felt a rush of pride at the colonel's words, but she maintained her professional composure. Thank you, sir. I had excellent wingmen who made the mission possible. Colonel Harrison smiled slightly. That's exactly the kind of response that tells me my assessment is correct. You understand that leadership isn't about individual glory. It's about bringing out the best in your team and accomplishing the mission safely and effectively. He paused for a moment, seeming to consider his next words carefully. I want you to know that your performance during Red Flag has been noted at levels well above this base. There are opportunities coming up that require exactly the kind of skills you've demonstrated here. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. Opportunities in the military aviation world were often code for advanced training programs, overseas assignments, or selection for elite units. What kind of opportunities, sir? Test pilot school, for one, Colonel Harrison replied. The Air Force is looking for pilots who can handle complex technical challenges while maintaining the highest safety standards. Your background in aerospace engineering, combined with your demonstrated flying skills and leadership abilities, makes you an ideal candidate. The mention of test pilot school sent a thrill through Sarah's entire body. It was one of the most prestigious and challenging programs in military aviation, a pathway that had historically led to astronaut selection and the highest levels of aerospace leadership. To even be considered was an incredible honor. There's also an opportunity with the Thunderbirds demonstration team, Colonel Harrison continued. They're specifically looking for pilots who can perform under pressure while representing the Air Force to civilian audiences. Your ability to maintain composure and execute precise maneuvers makes you a strong candidate for that program as well. Sarah was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the implications of what Colonel Harrison was telling her. These were career opportunities that most pilots could only dream of, and she was being told that her performance had earned consideration for both. I don't know what to say, sir, she finally managed. Don't say anything yet, Colonel Harrison replied with a slight smile. These are just possibilities being discussed. But I wanted you to know that the right people are paying attention to your work here. Excellence has a way of opening doors, Lieutenant Martinez. Your job is to keep being excellent. As they walked back toward the briefing area, Sarah felt as though she was walking on air. The snickers and whispered comments that had followed her for weeks suddenly seemed like distant memories. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel proud of how far she had come and excited about where her career might lead. The final week of Red Flag exercises brought an unexpected turn of events that would forever change how Sarah Martinez was perceived by her fellow pilots. What started as a routine training mission quickly escalated into a real-world emergency that tested every skill she had developed throughout her career. The morning briefing had covered Mission Delta 9, a complex scenario involving a simulated rescue operation in hostile territory. Sarah was once again selected as mission commander, this time leading a 6-ship formation that included both American and Allied aircraft. The mission profile called for close air support of a simulated downed pilot while defending against enemy fighters and avoiding surface-to-air threats. Morrison and Torres were among her wingmen for this mission, an assignment that Colonel Harrison had made deliberately. Despite their improved behavior following Sarah's successful leadership of previous missions, both pilots still harbored reservations about female combat pilots. Harrison believed that flying under Sarah's direct command during a challenging scenario would finally resolve any remaining doubts about her capabilities. As Eagle Flight prepared for takeoff, the weather conditions were less than ideal. High winds and scattered thunderstorms across the Nevada desert had already caused several mission delays, and meteorologists were predicting worsening conditions throughout the afternoon. Sarah studied the weather reports carefully, noting areas where turbulence and visibility might affect flight operations. Eagle Flight, this is Red Flag Control, came the voice over the radio as the 6 F-16 seconds taxied toward the runway. Be advised, weather conditions are deteriorating faster than predicted. Mission may be terminated if conditions worsen significantly. Sarah acknowledged the transmission while mentally reviewing contingency procedures. Military pilots were trained to adapt to changing conditions, but the combination of complex mission requirements and uncertain weather created additional challenges that required careful attention to safety margins. The takeoff proceeded normally, despite gusty crosswinds that tested each pilot's skill during the critical moments when aircraft were most vulnerable. Sarah's F-16 climbed smoothly into the turbulent air, followed by her 5 wingmen in precise formation. As they gained altitude, the ride smoothed out slightly. But towering cumulus clouds ahead indicated that more turbulent conditions awaited them in the mission area. Eagle Flight, contact red flag control on frequency 251.2 for mission updates. The tower controller transmitted as they departed Nellis airspace. Sarah switched frequencies and checked in with the exercise controllers, who provided updated intelligence information and confirmed that the mission was proceeding as planned despite the challenging weather. 30 minutes into the mission, as Eagle Flight approached the simulated combat area, Sarah's radar warning receiver detected an unexpected signal. Unlike the normal training signatures they had been briefing, this was something different. A real aircraft operating outside the designated exercise boundaries. Red flag control, Eagle 1, I'm detecting an unknown aircraft bearing 045, approximately 50 miles. Request clarification on exercise participants in that area, Sarah transmitted, her voice maintaining professional calm while her mind raced through possible explanations. The response from Red Flag Control came back immediately. Eagle 1, negative exercise aircraft in that sector. Stand by for further instructions. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized they might be dealing with a real intrusion into restricted military airspace. Such incidents were rare but serious, as they could involve anything from lost civilian aircraft to potentially hostile reconnaissance missions. Her training kicked in automatically as she began following protocols for unknown aircraft encounters. All Eagles, this is Eagle 1. Unknown aircraft detected outside exercise area. Maintain formation and prepare for possible mission termination, she announced over the internal flight frequency. She could hear the change in radio chatter as her wingmen processed this unexpected development. Captain Torres, flying as Eagle 3, was the first to respond. Eagle 1. Eagle 3. I have radar contact on the unknown aircraft. Appears to be civilian type, possibly lost or experiencing difficulties. His voice carried none of the casual skepticism that had characterized his earlier interactions with Sarah. This was a potentially serious situation that required professional competence above all else. Red Flag Control came back with urgent instructions. Eagle 1, we have confirmation that unknown aircraft is a civilian Cessna 172 that departed Boulder City Airport 2 hours ago and has not responded to radio calls. Aircraft was last reported as potentially experiencing mechanical difficulties. You are directed to intercept and attempt visual identification. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized the gravity of the situation. A missing civilian aircraft in deteriorating weather conditions was a genuine emergency that could involve loss of life. All traces of the training exercise evaporated as Eagle Flight transitioned to a real-world search and rescue operation. Eagle Flight, follow my lead to intercept course. Maintain spacing for visual search pattern, Sarah commanded, banking her F-16 toward the last known position of the missing aircraft. The formation executed the turn with precision, each pilot understanding that they were no longer participating in an exercise but conducting an actual emergency response. Morrison, flying as Eagle 2, spotted the aircraft first. Eagle 1, Eagle 2, visual contact on small aircraft, 11 o'clock low. Appears to be flying erratic pattern. Possibly in distress. His voice was tense but controlled, and Sarah noted that he was providing clear, professional communication without any trace of the dismissive attitude he had shown earlier. Sarah immediately adjusted course to close on the civilian aircraft, following strict protocols for intercept procedures. As she approached the small Cessna, she could see that it was indeed flying erratically, possibly indicating that the pilot was disoriented or experiencing medical difficulties. The aircraft was dangerously close to restricted military airspace and heading directly toward a thunderstorm that could prove fatal to such a small plane. Red Flag Control, Eagle 1 has visual contact with civilian aircraft. Aircraft appears to be in distress and is on course for severe weather. Request instructions for assistance, Sarah transmitted while maintaining visual contact with the struggling Cessna. The response was immediate. Eagle 1. You are authorized to provide assistance as required. Civilian aircraft is not responding to radio calls on any frequency. Use standard intercept signals to attempt communication. Quote, Sarah moved her F-16 into position alongside the Cessna, close enough for the civilian pilot to see her aircraft clearly. Following established procedures, she rocked her wings to get the pilot's attention, then used hand signals to indicate that the civilian aircraft should follow her to safety. Through the Cessna's windows, she could see an elderly man who appeared confused and possibly panicked. The civilian pilot seemed to understand Sarah's signals and began following her lead as she guided him away from the approaching thunderstorm toward clear air and a safe heading back to civilian airspace. It was a delicate operation that required precise flying skills and careful judgment, as the speed difference between the F-16 and Cessna made formation flying challenging. Eagle 1. This is Red Flag Control. Boulder City Airport has emergency services standing by. Recommend you guide civilian aircraft to Boulder City for emergency landing. Medical assistance will be available upon arrival. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and began a careful navigation procedure, leading the distressed Cessna through a series of gentle turns toward Boulder City Airport. The weather was continuing to deteriorate, with thunderstorms building rapidly across the desert, making the safe guidance of the civilian aircraft increasingly critical. Lieutenant Kim, flying as Eagle 4, provided crucial support by monitoring radio frequencies and coordinating with civilian air traffic control to ensure that emergency services would be ready when the Cessna arrived. Captain Rossi, participating in the mission as an exchange pilot, maintained a protective position to ensure that other air traffic remained clear of the emergency situation. The 40-minute flight to Boulder City required constant attention and careful maneuvering, as Sarah maintained position with the much slower civilian aircraft while avoiding increasingly severe weather conditions. She had to frequently adjust her speed and altitude to stay with the Cessna, demonstrating the precise flying skills that had earned her respect throughout the red flag exercises. Boulder City Tower. This is Air Force Eagle 1 escorting emergency civilian aircraft to your field. Request priority landing clearance and medical assistance upon arrival, Sarah transmitted as they approached the civilian airport. Eagle 1, Boulder City Tower, understand you are escorting emergency aircraft. Runway 15 is clear for immediate landing. Emergency services are standing by. The civilian controller's voice reflected the seriousness of the situation and appreciation for military assistance. Sarah guided the Cessna through a careful approach to Boulder City Airport, maintaining visual contact until the civilian aircraft was safely on the ground. Only then did she pull away and begin climbing back toward Nellis Air Force Base. Her mission successfully completed. Red Flag Control. Eagle 1. Civilian aircraft safely on deck at Boulder City. Emergency services are responding. Request permission to return to base, she reported, feeling the satisfaction that came with a successful rescue operation. Eagle 1, outstanding work. Return to base as directed. Medical personnel report that civilian pilot appears to have suffered minor medical episode, but is stable. Your assistance likely prevented a much more serious situation. As Eagle flight returned to Nellis, the radio was unusually quiet. The pilots were processing what had just occurred. A training exercise that had suddenly become a real emergency. Successfully resolved through professional competence and teamwork. Sarah had demonstrated leadership under genuine pressure, making critical decisions that had potentially saved a life. After landing and shutting down their aircraft, the pilots gathered in the hangar for an impromptu debrief. Colonel Harrison arrived shortly after, having monitored the entire incident from the control room. His expression was serious but clearly pleased as he addressed the flight. What happened today was exactly why we train the way we do, he began. When a real emergency occurs, there's no time for anything except professional competence and clear thinking. Lieutenant Martinez, your handling of this situation was exemplary. You transitioned from exercise to real-world emergencies seamlessly and made decisions that directly contributed to saving a life. Morrison stepped forward, his face showing an expression Sarah had never seen before. genuine respect mixed with what appeared to be embarrassment about his previous behavior. "Sir, I need to say something," he began, his voice carrying a seriousness that was completely different from his usual casual tone. Lieutenant Martinez demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and flying skill that every pilot should aspire to. Her decision-making today was flawless, and her ability to handle a complex emergency while maintaining flight safety was exceptional. He paused and looked directly at Sarah. "I owe you an apology, Lieutenant. My behavior during these exercises has been unprofessional and based on prejudices that have no place in military aviation." Captain Torres nodded in agreement. "Jake's right. What we witnessed today was world-class piloting under pressure. The call sign Viper-7 was earned through demonstrated competence, not given as any kind of favor. I apologize for suggesting otherwise." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions as she listened to these acknowledgments. Part of her was vindicated, knowing that her skills had finally been recognized by those who had doubted her. But another part felt sad that it had taken a genuine emergency for her colleagues to see past their preconceptions and recognize her abilities. Flight Lieutenant Crawford spoke up from across the hangar. "In the Royal Air Force, we have a saying. The sky doesn't care about your gender, your nationality, or your background. It only cares about your competence." Today, Lieutenant Martinez demonstrated that she belongs among the finest pilots of any Air Force in the world. Colonel Harrison concluded the impromptu ceremony with words that Sarah would remember for the rest of her career. "Excellence speaks for itself, but it takes courage to pursue excellence when others doubt your right to try." Lieutenant Martinez has shown both the skill and the character that define the best military aviators. Today, she didn't just earn the respect of her peers. She earned her place in Air Force history. As the group dispersed, Sarah remained in the hangar for a few extra minutes, looking at her F-16 and reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The snickers and whispered comments seemed like ancient history now, replaced by genuine respect earned through demonstrated competence under pressure. The elderly civilian pilot sent a letter to Nellis Air Force Base 3 days later, specifically thanking the lady pilot who saved my life. He described how Sarah's calm presence and professional guidance had helped him overcome panic and confusion during what could have been his final flight. Colonel Harrison read portions of the letter during the final red flag debrief, noting that such recognition from grateful civilians represented the highest honor any military pilot could receive. When Sarah returned home after the red flag exercises, she carried with her not just the satisfaction of a successful training completion, but the knowledge that she had proven herself in the most demanding circumstances possible. The call sign Viper-7 was no longer a source of mockery or doubt. It had become a symbol of competence, courage, and professionalism that would follow her throughout her career. Years later, when Sarah had achieved the rank of colonel and was commanding her own squadron, she would often tell young pilots that respect could not be given or taken away by others. It could only be earned through consistent demonstration of skill, character, and dedication to mission accomplishment. The lesson she had learned during those challenging weeks at Nellis Air Force Base became the foundation of her leadership philosophy. That excellence transcends all barriers and speaks a language that everyone can understand, regardless of their preconceptions or prejudices.